Hello and welcome to This Week in James City County. I'm your host, Renee Dahlman. Today I am once again joined by Scott Stevens, James City County's County Administrator. Welcome, Scott.
Hey, Renee, good to be back.
A lot of stuff going on.
It's been a busy couple months for
It
sure. Maybe
has.
that's always the way it is, but it's been true for February and January. The year has started off with a bang.
Absolutely. And I don't think it's going to slow down anytime soon. So I'm going to just let you take it away.
All right, Renee. Well, again, I just want to acknowledge we're almost through winter. I don't want to jinx us, but at least we're getting closer as we get into March. I always feel better that spring is coming around and just encourage people to get out and enjoy the change that takes place. And if you're a winter person, you can always hold on. Maybe we'll get a little snow in March or April. That has happened in the past. So time will tell for us. But for me, I'm looking forward to a little warmer weather. I do want to start, I guess, normally I talk about the board meetings. I will talk about one that was really a meeting that I led. It was a community conversations we held at the end of January. Had a very good turnout at Legacy Hall. We talked about just update from the police department. We talked about our new government complex. Brad Reinheimer gave a pretty good update there. We had our solid waste director, Bob Dittman, remotely give a presentation, same presentation he had given to the board on trash consolidation, and a lot of interest in that with members that were there. And then I led the discussion on the sports complex that we had talked about a lot through December and January. So I won't rehash it other than to say very good input, a lot of citizen engagement. Like I said, I think we had 150-ish plus at that meeting, and really great from your county staff side to have that kind of turnout and that kind of interest. And so just want to thanks to those that were in attendance, those that put on the presentations, and we hope to have more of those going forward in time in terms of conversations with our community members. As we move into the Board of Supervisors regular meetings, their February meeting, February 13th, couple public hearings, one on our Brickyard Landing property, the property the county purchased some years ago. It was a rezoning and an SUP. No comments on that. They had a William Bradford parcel designation change, really from moving what was meant to be a neighborhood recreation area to something that would let it develop as a residential property. A few residents spoke against that. There was a lot of history with that parcel, but the board ultimately approved what was asked for there and let it change from a park designation, a recreation designated area, to something they could build a home on, a single family home. The JCSA had two tie-ins that were part of public hearings for two neighborhoods, Westport and Liberty Ridge, and the board approved both of those as well. And then the board had a consideration where they denied an accessory apartment at the main. And again, that's just allowing someone to build a detached garage with an apartment above it that could then be rented for some purpose, and the board just had concerns that did not approve that. At their February 27th meeting, moving on to their business meeting, they had a Clean County Commission report with Ms. Peg Borman and Clean County Commission members. And again, we get a lot of volunteer hours that work towards making this community look better, whether it's litter pickup or education or a combination of all of those things. And it does take a lot of effort. We, the county, spend a lot of money picking up litter. Our volunteers spend a lot of time and effort picking up litter. And a bigger part is just getting us so we don't litter. And so we've got to continue with that message of trying to make sure that we do, all of us do our part to keep the community clean, because it just is a real effort and a cost to the community for us to continue to pick up trash. We did have our quarterly update from Rossi Carroll, the VDOT administrative residency person here. He comes every, I guess, quarterly, 4 times a year to the board, and I think gives a pretty comprehensive update, allows the board to ask questions and provide specific concerns or requests that they're hearing from members of the community. They also had accepted a check for the Chesapeake Bay protection for appropriated $21,000 for some cleanup within the Chesapeake Bay areas that they were moving forward with. We had an agreement with the clerk of court where we allow her staff to fall under the county's pay plan. That really, I think, is a benefit to her employees. We allow that of all constitutional officers. It is their choice whether they choose to participate in that or not. But our newly elected clerk of court wanted to continue that as well. We had a contract award of $123,000 for an EMS supervisor vehicle, and our vehicle that came sort of out of cycle. It was up for a replacement in our next year's budget, our FY25 budget. But the vehicle that we're currently running, the transmission went out, and rather than spend $8,000 or so on a vehicle with 130 or 140,000 miles, we asked the board if we could do that sooner, and they approved that purchase of that vehicle. They also accepted the dedication of streets in phase 2 of landfall. So the VDOT will be taking over. I think that completes the streets that VDOT will maintain within landfall, but that should be a good thing for the residents there and for the county as well to have that, not liability, but maintenance of those streets moved to the proper state agency. And then they did accept a grant of $1,500 for another love sign, and our staff is intending to work on one in War Hill that will be somewhat unique to James City County and our War Hill Sports Complex. So that was their action items. Also, at their February 27th meeting, the board heard from real estate assessor and an update on our real estate assessments. I believe that will become a lot of conversation over the next coming weeks as we are mailing out or did mail out notices the 29th of February. So this first week of March, people will begin receiving those. If they have not received those, the values are on the county's GIS system. So if a resident doesn't have their notice and wants to know what changed, they can search JCC GIS and find their property as well. Overall increase for county properties was about 18%. So that's what our real estate assessor had shared. 21% for residential properties. And so most of our property owners will see an increase in their value of their home. I don't think that comes as a surprise, and the range is pretty great. Some with almost no increase to others with 30, 40, 50% increases. But again, the average is at 21% overall. And most of that is due to new homes values. Some of that, a very small percentage, is due to just new development in the county, as that's been an ongoing growth for us over time. So we will continue to have conversations. That does generate almost an additional $20 million. If there is no change to the tax rate, it moves the median value of a home, not the average, but the median. They're close, but at the median, you have same number below, same number above. The median value in 2023, which really was the value we did in a reassessment 2 years ago, was $334,000 for the median house value. It is now moved in 2024 to $411,000. So that's a pretty significant increase. At the current tax rate of 83 cents, that's about $640 more a year or $50 more a month to the median value home. And again, we'll have more conversations around that. It's a lot of numbers. Most people want to know just what do they pay or what's the increase going to be. And that today at the 83-cent tax rate would be $53 more per month for the median value home, meaning if you're more than that or less, you pay more or less. As part of my proposed budget, and I'll talk more about that in a few minutes, I will either recommend the tax rate stay the same or a reduction in tax rate. Ultimately, our Board of Supervisors has the final say in what the tax rate will become and what the tax levy would be. This would not impact the June tax bills that are due. It would impact the December. So if this whatever change based on these new values would have an impact on December billing. So you still have a few months to sort of prepare whatever the outcome is from the county's budgeting process. But most individuals that I have spoken with about the reassessment, when I say, is it a price at which you would sell your home? And most have said it's closer. I think our assessments here have been somewhat behind. Sale prices continue to push up. Market supply continues to be not enough supply to meet the demand. So that keeps pushing houses up. There is an appeal process. So if you think your value is too high, or if you want to know, did we miss something or didn't have the right information to make that assessment or reassessment value, we do have an opportunity for you to call and talk to our appraiser that looked at your particular neighborhood. That number 253-6650. Again, 253-6650. And again, we are doing that. You can file an appeal with us through the end of March, so March 30th. So we would encourage you to do that. And if you're not happy with what the appraiser tells you from the county side, you do have an opportunity to file an appeal with the Board of Equalization. That has to be done before the end of April of this year, so April 30th, 2024. And again, if you think your value is overvalued, I would encourage you to reach out to us and try to work through that process. In most cases, I think you'll find our values still are not what your home would sell for if you put it on the market today. And it ought to be close. It shouldn't be more than that. But our goal and requirement under state code is for us to get that close. And so this is using 2 years worth of data. We've talked a lot about that. There's a lot of information on our real estate portion of our county's website, and could talk to you more about the process and other things. But I just want to say that 20% increase in value is significant in terms of what a resident's property owner is worth, and also the impact it could have on the property taxes they pay. Looking to York County, they had a similar increase in residential values. Looking to New Kent, they had a similar or a little higher increase in residential values. So I don't believe that our residential reassessment is out of line in terms of out of market. In fact, I still, as I said earlier, believe it is a little bit behind. And so if you feel that your assessment is too high, I would encourage you to take that opportunity to talk with us. Again, 253-6650. We'll get into our real estate office and they'll be happy to tell you upon which they base those numbers. You've talked a lot about the real estate assessment,
Mhm.
Renee. Is that enough of that?
I think you did a great job covering it.
Well, that's
Yes.
enough of that. We've talked a lot about it. We'll talk a lot more. It is serious and it is um, does have an impact on each of us in a different way. So, but our job is to get it close to market value, and I think that we're closer today than we have been for a while. The other thing the board heard at their February 27th meeting was a second quarter financial update, really just from our financial management services staff and our budget director, Cheryl Holland. They heard the county's really on track through the year in terms of expenditures being where they ought to be and revenue collections as comparison to this time last year really being on track. So we feel pretty good about how the year is tracking. And then the board had another discussion on scenic roadway protection and short-term rental discussion, and no real decisions, just some direction to the staff, and they'll bring things back at a future meeting date. So again, that gets us to their February and February 27th meetings. The board has typically had a retreat early in the year. They held that retreat March 2nd. So we spent Saturday at our law enforcement center off of Opportunity Way. Their retreat topics, they talked about refreshing our strategic plan. So not a deep dive into that, but just ensuring that they were supportive of that. And there will be an effort in the coming 6 to 12 months with some community input to refresh the county's strategic plan. I think the plan itself is okay, where in most cases where many communities, ours included, probably struggle is the measurables. How do we know it had an impact? Did we just take what we had and sort of fit it in? And that's what we do initially, try to put things in the categories that fit in the strategic plan. We've had some measurable parts of that, but I think the real effort this time will be to just reassert or confirm that our values are where we want them to be. And I think that process will be pretty easy. The harder part will be, how do we measure it? How do we know we're making progress? And so we'll have a little more effort this time on those things that we can track our progress with that. There's also been some discussion of red light cameras at stoplights and cameras in school speed zones. And so the board had asked to discuss that. There seemed to be a strong sense that we ought to do some of that. And so I think you'll hear more about. First, our recommendation was to put some cameras in schools speed zones that would be civil penalties, not moving violations, but would the idea of trying to slow vehicles down during school hours when those lights are flashing. And some of the initial reports done by the companies that install these type camera systems do show there are some speeding problems around our schools during the school zone time. And so these cameras would be put in with an idea of trying to slow people down to those posted speeds. And again, probably as early as next fall. And then red light cameras, we do have authorization where we can put up, I think it's one camera per 10,000 residents. So we could put up 8 cameras because we have 80,000 residents. You have to put them in intersections that have an identified safety issue, they have an accident history, and where the cameras would be intended to make a difference there for folks that are running red lights. So we have a little more discussion on that. I don't have specific intersections to point out, but I think you'll hear more of those conversations in the coming months from us on where. The board heard a short update on the government center, sort of the progress, and just a quick recap. We have entered into an interim agreement with Henderson Gilbane to work through our 30% design plans. That'll get us into schematic drawings. That'll get us into building renderings. That'll have some community meetings. So there will be opportunity for public input of what you want to see in a government center. And again, we have talked about the corner property there beside the recreation center on Long Hill Road, where the skate park is located, of being our preferred site. There's about 10 acres there, would serve the county, I believe, very well from geography of where it's located, central to the county, more modern facility, more departments in one building. And then we would, I believe, abandon the Mounts Bay campus. We don't have a future intended use for it at this point, but we wouldn't maintain much of a presence at the Mounts Bay campus, if any. We would move our government center there and be more central to our community and have a modern building. It comes with a $100 million or so price tag. We'll know that by the end of this interim agreement. And again, a lot more discussion before we get there. It is not a done deal that we will build the building, but we are going through this process to sort of make that determination. But I would tell you the need is real. We do need space. If you'll walk through our buildings, and you will see that we are putting what used to be an office of 1, 2, 3, 4 people into that room. We are subdividing it because of COVID and the idea of having people back in their own space. So they were breathing mostly their own air. And it is really tight in a lot of our workspaces. So just a short update with the board on that so they can be involved in that process. And I think we'll have regular monthly updates of their business meeting going forward. So as the community wants to be part of that, they can at least have that as a place to look for it. And there'll be some other opportunities as well. The other thing we talked about with the board and really spent a lot of, a while on this topic is our pay in class study. We started one last August. We have been using a firm to go through and sort of look at our peers around us from Henrico County down through Newport News, Hampton, 14 localities in terms of trying to see what they're paying their staffs, a little bit of look at the private sector for similar jobs. And what Bolton has come back to say is really you need to do something to help on your retention of staff and going forward. And it comes with a pretty big price tag. And that is something I'll speak to more in the budget time. But again, a lot of discussion around staffing and how do we help there. So I'll come back to that in a few minutes. We also talked about benefits. So where we're maybe not as caught up as some other localities. We have made improvements in a lot of areas from leave time. And again, our benefits packages are very good. But if we are competing with other localities, a day or two here or a week there or this kind of thing does make a difference in where people spend their career. One that is out there today that has been asked for by a number of staff, and particularly our public safety side, is some help with medical premiums and retirement. If you work with the county, retire here with 15 or 20 years, you can stay on our health insurance, but you have to pay for it. York County pays 50% of that cost. City of Williamsburg has started paying a portion of that cost for their retirees, and James City County has been asked to. And so it is a trend amongst localities where a number of us that haven't been in that are being asked to be. And I believe to be competitive, we have to do something. And so we have talked about at least a step towards that to limit the county's liability, but to also provide some benefit to our employees. And so we'll have more discussion on that in terms of what that looks like in the coming months. We also had some community development items discussion. One is really it's time for our comprehensive plan refresh. Do that every 5 years. It seems like we have just finished the current one, and planning staff Renee agrees with me on
I
that.
do.
Anyhow, we've had a lot of revisions, a lot of action related to that, and it was a much more involved effort this time than it has been in some other years from a staff standpoint and consultants work and our policy committee working. And so those kinds of things. So our staff recommendation was not to jump back in to that comprehensive plan rewrite today. And the board concurred with that. We will still do our citizen survey just because we do that every 5 years and we'll have that data. So that would be something that would still come out. Where staff would like to focus is we have made a lot of changes to our zoning ordinances over the last 20, 30, 40 years without a significant rewrite of those zoning ordinances. And so as you do that, it gets harder and harder to track where things are. And so staff's recommendation is that we really focus this year trying to rewrite our zoning ordinance so that all these pieces that have happened over the years are more logically oriented in a document. So I think that will be a really good effort for us and something we're moving towards. We've talked about workforce housing. I think that's an issue in most every community. We completed a housing task force discussion in the 2018-19 timeframe. We have implemented some of the easier components of that, and we just were having conversations with the board on some other ideas. And no specific outcome from that, just a constant sort of discussion of that, of how do we help people with affordability in James City County, particularly those at the lower end of the pay scales, of how do you get them so they can work here and in fact live here and be part of our community, not just during the 8 to 5 hours or whatever work schedule they have, but that they can really afford to be here as well. So more to come on that. And then we talked about some transportation related issues and funding out there with VDOT. We also talked about sidewalks, and in particular sidewalks around our schools, where the school division has instituted some of these no transportation zones within a radius of elementary schools and a radius of middle schools. The end result is we still have many, many miles, and I think the number was 20 some miles of sidewalk that we need to build in order to accommodate all of those areas around those schools. And so that is a huge lift to get there and a lot of money in order to have those sidewalks in place. So even if the money was there, it still takes a lot of time, and the money's not there, but the conversation started. We will be seeking funds, grant funds where we can, or outside agency fundings where we can, to help put sidewalks in place where they make sense. So we'll just a start of a conversation there. And then we also talked about bus stops. We have, WADA serves a number of localities. Their funding for bus stop improvements is somewhat limited and is a much slower process than maybe we could enhance. And our recommendation is that we put up some county money to put bus stops in James City County. So our residents that are standing in tall grass currently don't have a place to sit or possibly a trash can. At least we could put, maybe not a shelter because those take more dollars and effort, but we could make a pretty good start with putting in a concrete pad. So at least if you're standing at the bus stop, you have a semi not soggy place, not high grass place. You have a bench and you have a trash can, and then water would maintain those facilities for us going forward. And the board seemed receptive to that. We also had budget discussion, and circling back a little bit with the board in terms of that, just the timeline for the budget. Our staff really started last fall, so we have been working on position requests, on capital improvement projects, those kinds of things to roll up into the budget. I've been having meetings with departments through the month of February. I'm just about through with all those in early March. The budget, my proposed budget will be out at the end of March. I think March 29th is the date we are working towards. And then we'll have about a month and a half of community conversation and input. The first of those with the reassessments coming and the idea that we would have some significant additional tax revenue from our residents, we felt it was important to offer meetings where we come out and sort of talk about why, trying to help our residents understand where we believe the money is. It's not just in building a government center, because that's not part of that. That's built into our CIP and future funding. It's really the need for staff and to be able to pay our staff appropriately, to have staff to serve this community as it's growing, and to have additional positions as we go forward in time. And those take dollars. On the other side, we heard from school division most recently, their ask of the localities this year, the governor's budget, upon which they have based their budget, adds about another $100,000 to our school system's budget. Their ask to the localities, meaning James City County and the city of Williamsburg, is $8 million. That it gives their staff a 3% pay raise. The systems around us are giving 5%. So that doesn't keep our teachers where they ought to be. If they ask 3% raise for their staff, the ask to James City County is just over $7 million. If I look at a pay study of what we need for our staff, it's pretty close to $8 million. That's $15 million. And that's not including any other inflationary costs that we're all experiencing in terms of supplies and building costs and just the cost of doing business. And so for me, the additional revenue is needed in order to have a staff that can continue to serve this community. We have a great group, but when I looked, it is a group that is getting younger in terms of tenure with the county. And I'll come back to that in a minute and talk a little more about staffing, because I could get lost in that if I'm not careful. The other real opportunities for community input are these community budget meetings that I had alluded to. So March 29th, we will put the budget out. April 3rd, and all of these are at 6 o'clock. April 3rd at 6 o'clock, we will have a budget meeting for the Berkeley district. Any resident is welcome to attend. So whatever, it will be the same topic. It's just your representative from that district will be at those. Others may, but for sure that will. So for the Berkeley district, we have said Legacy Hall, April 3rd at 6 p.m. For the Jamestown district, we have said April 4th at 6 p.m. at the Recreation Center. For the Stonehouse district, we have a community meeting at Toano Middle School, April 8th at 6 p.m. It's something written over my date and time and place. For the Paladin district, we have April 10th at 6 p.m. at Hornsby Middle School. And then for the Roberts district, it's the only one at 4 p.m. It will be April 11th at 4 p.m. at the James City County Government Center here on Mounts Bay Road. And so you can attend, again, any one of those. The presentations will be the same. The question and answer could be different depending on what questions are asked. But our intent will be to present the budget, talk about the need for additional revenue and where we see it's going, and see what kind of questions or concerns we have from the community. And so I would encourage you to become involved and be part of one of those meetings. If you're able to participate, again, 6 o'clock p.m. for 4 of them, 4 o'clock p.m. for 1 of them. And I hope that we'll have a good turnout there and the ability to have that conversation with our community members. We're also doing one of these, a podcast with you to talk about the budget. We're doing that, I guess, in early April. It should be out, I think, by April 5th, so that you'll have the opportunity to, if you missed one of the budget meetings, probably similar information about the budget, questions that we've heard or we anticipate, we'd be happy to share. But that is something we will have out there as a podcast for you to listen to and at least understand why we believe there's a need for more dollars. There is a budget public hearing April 9th. And so in the midst of all those community meetings, our Board of Supervisors holds their public hearing. The meeting begins at 5. The public hearing would occur sometime after that on April 9th here at Mounts Bay. And then we have a business meeting with the board on April 23rd, just their regular business meeting. We would talk more about the budget. We could have additional meetings if the board felt a need for that. and then we'd ask the board to adopt the budget May 14th. So a lot of budget discussion coming from us over the next 4 to 6 weeks, and hopefully to help the community understand and ask questions and at least feel okay with where we're headed with the resources they provide. So when I talk about budget and what is really pushing for us, it is staffing. And we have made as a county very good progress in the last 2 years, I believe, taking what our minimum pay is, and we don't have a minimum wage, but our lowest paid job was just $9.60, $9.80 an hour 2 years ago. We now have that just under $15. So we have made, I think, significant effort there. And it's moved really the bottom 1/3 of our pay scale so that we didn't have folks in a higher pay grade making less than somebody that was we hired yesterday, but it's really created compression in the lower end, and we haven't done a whole lot for the middle 2/3 to the top, of that, next 2/3 to the top of our scale. And when I look at staffing, and again, it's a point in time, and I'm not sure what the numbers mean in total, but of our almost 900 employees, 50% of them have been here less than 5 years, 5 years tenure with the county. Doesn't mean they have 5 years experience. Or our police chief would fall into that. He's got less than 5 years with us. He's got 27 years experience. So it's not quite what it looks like, but we still have a lot of people with not a lot of tenure here with James City County. As we look at how many have less than 10 years experience, it's almost 70% of our 900 employees have less than 10 years experience. And I don't know if that's concerning. It sounded higher than I would have thought it should be. The area that probably concerns me the most is when I look 11 to 15 years, we have 8% of those 900 there, about 70 some employees. 5 years ago in 2018, and I don't have a lot of historical data, but looking back at 2018, that number was 17%. So I had twice as many with 11 to 15 years of service. And what I believe has occurred is through all of whatever with COVID and salaries and vacancies and people's willingness to move on, I think we've lost a pretty good slug of people that used to move from that 5 to 10 year sort of cohort into the 11 to 15. The challenge is I don't have those folks to move up to the 15 to 20 and then to the 20 and 30. And so I do worry about that. And when I look at salaries, our ability to retain, that is part of it. And we are behind in some areas pretty significantly. And so the pay study tries to address a little more on the hiring side so we can attract people, and then a little more on the retention side where we're moving people through a pay scale, at least to the midpoint, and where we're trying to do a little better to make sure their job is in the right classification, with the idea that we'll be competitive with those localities around us or the private sector that may take some of the staff with some of the same skill sets we have. So we will talk more about that in terms of our budget meetings, but those are the real drivers are personnel. Again, some other inflationary kinds of things, but it really is people. And so I think it's a need and something we'll have to continue to serve the community well. And we'll talk more about that through those meetings. I think that's it for those. A couple of things I'd mentioned are out there. The Marina project, we have had, as you most know, a year ago, we took down the floating covered slips. We had a section of our first phase of our Marina dock project that we had not built all the dockage. We have since built those slips, and I think it's another 16 slips, and then a finger or long pierce with some transient boats, so boats could come in, spend a day or an hour they're tied up, come up and enjoy Billsburg in the park, and then get back in their boat and leave. And so that will be in place. That was scheduled for April. I think they'll be ahead of that. They were doing the finishing touches out there, but it does give us more opportunity within the marina. We have another design project going on to sort of improve, add more floating docks, improve parking, stormwater requirements, and some of the boat storage areas. So more to come on that. Maybe 6 to 12 months from now, we'll have another project to award to move that forward. But this first phase of the marina expansion in terms of adding additional dockage, since we have taken down the covered slips, is just about complete. Schools, we continue to talk about schools and the joint system. The city has announced they're on track to have information out March 11th. So I think we'll have a lot of conversation. Their intent would be, as I understand it, after they're discussed with their city council, they would have some public meetings with their community. And then we're having sort of similar kinds of discussions on our side, and we would have some public meetings as well, with the idea that we would make a decision to whether we renegotiate a contract and stay together or whether we separate. And again, I hope we'll make that decision before the end of the school year. City manager and I do have an agreement in place that says if we were to separate, we would still not do that unless we both agree until the fall of 28. That would give me time to build a middle school, because as I've said before, if we were to separate and have an independent system, I don't have space for about 600 to 800 middle school students. we would need to build a middle school, and it's going to take at least a 4-year time frame to do that. So we will see. I think a lot more conversation in the next 4 to 6 months about the joint system, and do we stay or do we do something different? Um, and Renee, that might be all I had. Anything else I ought to talk about today that you're aware of?
I think that you have pretty much covered it all. And again, like what we said at the beginning, there is just so much going on. And I think that it's great that you are willing to sit in with us on these podcasts and really give a good explanation of everything that is happening and that people can go back through, month to month and listen to how all of this is coming to fruition. And I just really appreciate your time.
Well, Renee, city manager and I were talking. I think we do a lot of effort to educate the community, and I think we do more and more and more, and it seems to be harder and harder and harder to get it out. So this is just another, I think, great way for us to put information out into the community. To your point, you can watch it at your convenience or listen in. And there are other ways we're doing that through your efforts in social media. We're doing news releases all the time. We are working with the Gazette and our reporters there, and we can't make them write a story, but we certainly try to help them through those stories. But there's just a lot of ways to get news and information, and I think this is another good one. If it appeals to our residents, it's certainly worth my time and yours to continue to do this. So thanks for pushing us along and keeping us on track. And I would just tell people, as I said earlier, it's moving into springtime. I hope you'll find the day to get out and walk and run and bike, whatever it is that appeals to you. But to be outside and enjoy this community, it really is a beautiful place to live. And if you're not careful, you'll miss some of that. So I would just think we all sort of have to be mindful to make an effort to do that, myself included. But moving in one way or another is good for all of us. So I would encourage that as the weather gets better. So
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And we will see you back in another couple of weeks, I think. So it'll be here before we know it.
look forward to it.
All right. Thanks. Well, that wraps up this episode of This Week in James City County. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, please feel free to subscribe. That way you will never miss an episode. You can also go to our website. We're at jamescitycountyva.gov/podcast. And while there, you'll find all of our shows as well as a form that you can complete. Give us comments, critiques, thoughts, other guest ideas. We would love to hear from you. So once again, thank you so much, and we will talk with y'all next week.